Well, hello. My name's Jayne-Anne Gadhia, and I wanted to thank you all very much indeed for spending time with me in this rather unusual format at the Women in Business Expo today. I hope everyone's had a safe and happy summer and that it won't be too long till we can all see each other face to face again. So forgive me as I try and talk to myself really at this point to tell a little bit of my story and what it's been like for me as a woman in business for the last, goodness me, 30 years plus, I guess. But rather than taking you through my entire story, I'm going to start back in June 2015. And back then, I was invited to the big Mansion House speech that was given every year, is given by the Chancellor of the Exchequer. And for those of you that have been to the Mansion House, you'll know that these sort of events are very significant, very glitzy. The very few women that turn up there are in their long dresses, and all the men tend to look the same because they're all in their dinner suits. And it can be a bit intimidating. Certainly for many years I'd felt that I would turn up and not know who I'd meet or if I knew anyone in this sort of very male-dominated world. And back in 2015, I went through the door and again looked for somebody that I knew. And the person that I saw first was HortaOsaria, who you'll all know as the CEO of Lloyd's for very many years and who's done very successfully there. So I went over to speak with Antonio and we were chatting for a few minutes and I looked up and there was another man relatively famous in the city from one of the investment banks who was coming over to see us. And I'd known this man for a very long time, and for one reason or another, and perhaps the women here will understand what I mean, it always made me feel a bit inadequate, and I don't know why, but sometimes people do that to you, don't they? And my suspicion was that he was coming over to speak with Antonio. But as this man arrived, Antonio turned away to speak with someone else. So unfortunately for this man, he was stuck with me. And we started to chat for a while. And of course, he then said to me, "So, Jayne-Anne, where are you sitting tonight?" And one thing that's for sure is that the table plans at these glitzy events are very, very complicated. I pity the poor people that have to put them together. And the table plans basically have a list of the 300 or 400 people that are at the event on the back in alphabetical order, so you can find your name. It gives you a sort of grid reference on the table plan so that you can see where you're sitting and indeed find your seat. And you sort of know your level of seniority in this room or in the institution of financial services in the UK by where you sit at this table. And when I first went many years ago, I was definitely sat at the very bottom of the very back table. And I was pleased the next year to be a bit more in the middle and pleased the next year to be closer to the top table and then on it. It's one of those sort of strange establishment things, I think, that sort of makes you feel either good or bad depending on where you are. Anyway, this guy said to me, "Jayne-Anne, where are you sitting tonight?" And I said, "I'm really sorry, I don't know, because I've forgotten my glasses and I haven't been able to read the tiny little writing that is written, that everybody's names are written in." And he laughed and he said, "Well, I'll tell you what, let me have a look for you then." So with a flourish, he sort of opened up this complicated table plan, ran his finger down to find my name, Gadhia. And he said, and of course he said a little bit more colourfully than this, "Oh gosh, you're sat next to the Chancellor." And it was one of those moments that really made me laugh because I'd started off feeling, terribly belittled by where I was and who I was with. And here I was being sat next to the Chancellor. And I'm sorry if it sounds a little bit, too self-important. It made me feel good for a moment at least. So I sat down next to George Osborne, who was the Chancellor at the time. And, there's another couple of funny stories along the way. I remember he gave a speech about RBS at that particular event. And as he stood up to speak, he said, "Now look, the TV cameras are going to be on me, so I'd really appreciate it if you do your best to look interested." So of course I tried to do that, and a number of people have laughed at me since because there are these sort of photographs from the telly of me looking adoringly at George Osborne, which was my attempt to look interested, but I'm not sure it went down terribly well, but I tried to do what I was asked. But the reason that George had asked me to sit next to him, I think, was that he wanted to talk to me about leading a review that was about improving productivity in the United Kingdom, because, as many of you will know, our productivity is not as good as other European countries in particular. And he started to talk to me about the fact that bringing more women into more senior positions in financial services was very, very likely, analytically likely, or analytically certain, I guess, to improve productivity. And until that point, I hadn't really been a huge exponent of driving what I might call a women's agenda. I'd always felt a little bit uncomfortable about it, and never wanted positive discrimination, never particularly liked being part of women's groups. And so I was a bit, again, not sure what he was really asking. And then he said, well, you do know the numbers, don't you? You do know that only 14% of middle managers and above are women in financial services. And that's much worse than any other industry that I can think of. And that was the thing that really pulled me in, because I thought, well, why would my sector, why would financial services be any worse than any other sector? Why is it that women can reach the top of other professions, other industries, other sectors, the NHS, airlines? Why can they do that and not financial services? So when George then asked me, would I take on this plan and do some research and put together a proposal for addressing it, it was something that I definitely embraced with interest and with open arms. And that was how we started to create what's subsequently become known as the Women in Finance Charter. And what we did to identify some of the problems that we wanted to address in the Charter was to reach out to men and women across financial services throughout the United Kingdom, banks, insurance companies, asset management companies, PE firms, to see what they thought. And of course, my own unconscious biases were there too. I thought that part of the reason that would be caring responsibilities that women, I thought, tended to take the main share of, whether that's children or older parents or whatever. And really interestingly, when people, as I say, men and women, came back to talk about why it was that they didn't want to progress in financial services, motherhood or caring, never anywhere near the top of the reasons that were cited. And the interesting reasons were, one reason that I remember very clearly was technology. Let me be much more flexible so that I can work at home where needs be. And I can then, manage my life more flexibly based on the needs that my family have. And of course, with a bit of luck, our current experience with COVID means that has now been something that we can all pick up and learn from going forwards. It probably brings its own challenges, but flexibility of working is something that hopefully this crisis has been able to address. Secondly, they said, please make sure that senior managers and middle managers are well trained to understand their unconscious biases, because we as managers, as women managers, feel that we're not always valued as much as men if we have male managers. And I found that really, really interesting when I was running Virgin Money, which I did for many years until the business was bought by the Clydesdale in October 2018. And the year before, as I'd been doing this work, I'd been looking at the bonuses in Virgin Money, where we'd tried so hard to be equal across gender and full, diverse audiences. And I looked at these bonus allocations that had come from my team, and I'd asked the HR team to analyse them so that we could see that men and women were being treated fairly. And much to my horror, even in my own business, the initial pass at bonuses came out that men were being paid on average more than women in most departments. And of course, I sent them back to all of the team leaders and said, how can this be? And they reviewed them and thought, yeah, how can it be? And of course, what it was that men tend to go to their managers and bang the table and say, I've had a really good year, pay me well. And women tend to go home and say to their partners or friends, I think I've done really well, I hope I get recognised. And weaker managers tend to respond to the people that bang the table. And so no table banging anymore was allowed at Virgin Money, if that's the right way to put it. It was very much about analysing performance objectively, and we found that we got a normal distribution of bonuses across the genders. Really, really interesting. And the third thing, which I guess sort of pulls all of that together, was that women were saying, look, we just don't like the culture in financial services. You know, we need to address this culture of presenteeism, that we always have to be there. We want to be able to be paid fairly in the way that I've just described. We want to be taken seriously. We don't want to be treated as difficult if we challenge. We need managers and leaders to understand that a really successful business isn't about bringing in women and other groups on white men's terms. It's about creating a whole new way of doing business on terms that are diverse, because the business is led by a diverse group of people. And that was so important to me, something that I've been passionate about for so long, ever since, that we pulled it together in what we call the Women in Finance Charter. And what the Charter said was, let's not address this issue as an HR issue or a sort of soft woman's issue. Let's make it a business issue. Let's make sure that CEOs around financial services throughout the United Kingdom have this issue on their desk and are measured against it weekly, monthly, quarterly and annually in the same way as they are their business results. And let's make sure they have a strategy where they're falling short of their targets to achieve their targets in the same way that they do for their business results. And let's make sure that where they achieve their targets, they get paid bonuses. And if they don't, their bonus is affected in the same way as with their business results. And how fascinating is it? The biggest pushback we get was, don't bonus me on this. And of course, the organisations that absolutely embraced it were very keen to have these sort of targets set in their bonus, because I'm not setting quotas, I'm not proposing any targets. What I'm saying to organisations is, you tell us what your target should be and then hit it. How can anyone object to that? And over time, we found that the objections have become less and less. We now have over 350 organisations signed up. Very interestingly, the big banks signed first. I mean, some of them actually even before we launched, because I was ringing around the city getting support, and the big banks could see that diverse teams would have perhaps achieved better outcomes during the financial crisis than the teams that were in place in big banks up to 2008. So the big banks wanted to change their culture and as a result embraced the Charter. Insurance companies were slower, the asset management companies were slower still, and so were the investment banks. But broadly, we have now all of the key businesses in the United Kingdom financial services sector signed up to the Women in Finance Charter. And that's made a huge difference, because it means that there are internal target sets, strategies to achieve gender diversity, a measurement of how successful businesses are, and I think very importantly, transparency of which businesses are succeeding or not, because we require businesses to report against their own internally set targets. So I really hope that the Women in Finance Charter continues to make a big difference. I also think that I've learned along the way that this sort of work, work that is focused on helping women to succeed, has to be supported by powerful men. And when we launched the Charter, which I think was back in March 2016, it was, yes, I remember it clearly for this reason. I'd been ringing around the city, as I say, to get some support for the ideas in the Charter. And one day I was supposed to be speaking with Mark Carney, who was then the Governor of the Bank of England, about it. And very sadly, it was the day that my mum died. And so I had to change the date of the meeting with him, of course. And when I did speak to him, he said, well, I'm really sorry I can't help in terms of the problems that you've had at home and the loss of your mum, but I can help with the Charter. What would you like me to do? And I said to him, well, Mark, it'd be brilliant if we could launch it in the Court of the Bank of England. He said, oh, easy, of course you can do that. So because it was at the Court of the Bank of England, we had, for those of you who know it, it's a beautiful big room, the actual courtroom there. It was packed, Would it have been packed if Mark hadn't made it there? I don't know. Mark himself was there. I knew he was going to be there, but what I didn't know was he was going to speak. And he introduced me, and in introducing me, made it very clear that he and the Bank of England thought that this was an extremely important and serious issue. And of course, because Mark Carney and indeed Andrew Bailey, when he was head of the FCA at the time, because they were so committed to this agenda, then I think it helped other organisations take it seriously and realise that this time something had to be done. So I'm always encouraging of making sure that as we try and look at what could be seen as a female agenda, it's very clear that it's an agenda of equality that needs men and women together to make it successful, and indeed will create success equally for men and women. I mean, I remember doing a presentation at the Bank of England sometime later, and a 40-year-old white man stood up and said, look, I'm interested in what you're doing, but aren't you taking away my job and my son's job for the future? And it's fascinating because we can't be seen to be anti-men or challenging men or holding back men. That's definitely not what it's about. This is about, as George Osborne so rightly identified, improving productivity because we're bringing together women and men and giving them equal opportunities and letting them rise to those opportunities. It's not about replacing men with women or indeed replacing anyone with anyone else. It's about giving everyone equal opportunity to be challenging and diverse and different in all that they do. And that's been a huge lesson for me that I've really valued throughout my career. I think that I've also been hugely lucky in my career because I've worked at Virgin for so long. And one of the things that I learned from Richard Branson, who I've worked with for 25 years probably, was the power of taking on your opportunities and saying yes. And sometimes I think that that can be quite scary for men and for women, often for women in particular perhaps, to just sort of put themselves out there and take a risk and, you know, take an opportunity. But as I look back over my career, and funny enough, the reason that I know this is that when, as I say, my mum died in February 2016, and my father sadly died only a few weeks later. And just for cathartic reasons, I think, as much as anything, I started to sketch out the story of Virgin Money and my life to that date. And suddenly this whole story poured out, and I didn't really know what I was going to say. And what became obvious to me as I was writing it was that my career has been just a story of opportunities taken, really, you know, lots of luck along the way. And when people have asked me to do something that's been different and challenging, broadly, I've said yes and tried to open my arms and make some of those opportunities come to life, whether that's joining Virgin itself, setting up a different business within the Virgin Group. The Virgin One account comes to mind, listing the business, buying Northern Rock, you know, all of those opportunities, I guess, are something that is thrown in your way as you develop your career. And I thoroughly recommend to everyone taking that opportunity and moving forward. It's interesting, since the business Virgin Money was sold to the Clydesdale and I have started on a new path, I've had all sorts of opportunities, and I was mulling over a particular one recently, and it was my daughter who said to me, come on, Mum, you're the one that says always say yes, you must take that opportunity and you must run with it. And of course it's been one of those things that's been absolutely brilliant for me, which has been joining Salesforce as an advisor and learning more about the tech industry. And that's something that I will always value. I might have thought of myself always as a banker, but now I've been able to perhaps broaden out a little bit more into a wider and more exciting, additionally exciting place. But it hasn't always been easy and straightforward, of course. And I've been mulling during lockdown what it really is to be a woman in business. And the thing that's inspired me during lockdown, really, I don't know if any of you watched it, has been the Sky documentaries about Hillary Clinton. And I didn't really know very much about Hillary Clinton. I think, like many people, I've been affected in my outlook on her by some of the commentary in the press and the media. And watching this documentary, so much of it resonated. It sort of said so much about my life too, because you can see in what she's done over her life. Of course she's made some mistakes. Of course she's said some stupid things like we all do. But actually, I think she's been judged differently, and indeed judged at all in many ways, differently to men. She's been judged as a woman. And, you know, some of the things that happened to her as she was developing her career and becoming a successful lawyer and then marrying Bill Clinton, some of the negativity around her has absolutely been, well, that's not what women do. And I was really shocked at it. Recommend it to everyone if you haven't watched that documentary so far. And it made me realise that in all of my career, like so many of us, you know, there have been many nights and weekends that I've come home and felt that I've had a really difficult week and felt that I've been challenged for the way I behave, for being difficult, for speaking up. And, you know, there are definitely people throughout my career, and almost certainly still today, who would describe me as a difficult woman. And it's really interesting because I found that hurtful. I don't try and be difficult. I just try and say what I think. And I was interested when Theresa May said that, you know, when she became Prime Minister, that somebody said, oh, she's a bloody difficult woman. And she tried to celebrate that. And I noticed that at the time. But of course, the same was said about Hillary Clinton, that she's difficult. And that made me start to think, am I really difficult? Well, I suppose like all human beings, I am from time to time, but it's not my desired modus operandi. So why do people think that about me or any successful woman? And I'm pretty sure, and I want to do a bit more work on all of this, that actually what the establishment mean when they say anyone's a difficult woman is she doesn't behave like us. You know, there's a certain way of behaving that tends to have been created by successful white men, many of whom have played rugby or gone to school together. And if you challenge that, that's not necessarily seen to be the right thing because it's not the way in which it's always been done. And that's what can be seen to be difficult. Whereas I think it's about changing things progressively through constructive challenge. And it's not always received that way. And, you know, as Black Lives Matter has flourished, I've been thinking the same thing. You know, there are all sorts of organisations and people, many of whom I've experienced and known, who say, of course we're not racist, of course we're not sexist, come and join us and be part of the team and behave like us. And therein lies the problem. We have to be open to new types of behaviour, I think, to achieve real diversity and achieve places of work where everyone feels that they can belong. And that's my new crusade. Alongside my new business crusade, and I want to finish by just mentioning that to you. So I'm delighted that back when the Clydesdale Bank acquired Virgin Money in October 2018, some of my wonderful Virgin team, we'd all worked together for a long time, came to me and said, come on, let's do it again. Let's set up a digital bank and really take on the likes of Monzo or Revolut or Starling. And we realised that actually we didn't want to be a bank again. You know, banks are great, but they have regulatory and capital requirements that if you didn't have to build them in, you might not build them in. And so we took the opportunity to bring our banking skills and our technology skills to consumers by using open banking, becoming regulated by the FCA, building a bank level security and cyber system such that every customer knows that they're safe with a trusted institution. We ask those customers to connect their bank accounts to us, and we analyse their banking transactional data to look at their historic and current spending patterns. And we tell them through what we call a series of Snoops how they can spend and save better. And we're finding that we're saving the average household in the UK about 1,500 quid a year. And the level of engagement that customers have with Snoop is extremely high. We're putting on about 1,000 new customers a day and we're having fun doing it. And the reason I think that we're getting both fun and engagement is that our absolute focus is to make everyone better off. We're really looking forward to being able to put customers in control with their own data, not be ripped off by banks or big businesses, to save them money and to have a bit of fun along the way. And I think that that's a business opportunity that I'm hugely proud to be part of and hugely grateful to be able to work on. And I hope that I'll see you all on Snoop at some point soon, but more particularly that you'll all be working to really broaden out the gender agenda, to create real diversity of thought, word and deed in your businesses, and to grow UK productivity as a consequence. Keep well. Thank you for having me. See you all again soon. Bye-bye.